When I was 10 years old, bored with my lessons, I dreamed about sword fighting and sailing the ocean. Now I'm realizing that the world is stranger than I ever imagined. Everything I know has been turned on its head, but I'm dealing with it the best I can.
I believe that most gamers fall into two camps that I just made up. Those who think that a sequel that is just more of the same is perfectly fine, and those that think that more of the same is garbage and a sequel should have never been made. I used to be in the former, but after playing Dishonored 2, I think I'm starting to cross over into the latter. Now, this isn't to say that the game is bad, it's just sort of there. And the problem is I had heard good things about Dishonored 2, how it built off of the first game, had a more fleshed out world, and there were even comments about some truly unique level design. And let's not forget my love affair with the game Arkane put out after Dishonored 2, Prey 2017. My dumb mind assumed that with the games being closer to one another, that Dishonored 2 might have contained more similar elements to Prey. Alas, it wasn't to be. The root of my problem with Dishonored 2 is what I said to begin with. It essentially retreads old ground already covered in the original game. The events of the sequel kick off with a witch, supposedly the sister of the last empress you failed to save in the previous game, usurping the throne and leading to you becoming a fugitive who has to clear their name. You play as either Corvo, protagonist of the previous plot and protector of pompous peoples, royals, or as Emily, Corvo's kid, now Empress Kaldwin, who carries comparable credentials to her creator. By which I mean she stabs folks just as good as her dad does. But the character choice is super superficial. No matter who you are, you still get exiled to a new city, have to take out a bunch of Victorian-era Bond villains, and return to your home as a supernatural lunatic trying to restore the status quo or something. And it just kills me how it is the exact same plot and structure of the first game. It was a safe move, the obvious choice to rewatch a YouTube video when you're about to eat something, and the game suffers for it. I'm sure anyone who didn't play Dishonored 1 would probably really enjoy this game, but for those that did, there is nothing new here. There are no surprises, or twists and turns, or additions or subversions to the formula. You go to several locations where bad people are, find the bad person, and either murder them or completely assassinate their existence in a non-violent, massive quotation marks, morally right way, but oftentimes seems to be the much more malevolent option. It is a massively missed opportunity. So the plot is there, it's generic and predictable, and to make it worse, the dialogue is still just not very good. The worst example of this is the incidental overheard dialogue that guards and civilians spout the moment you look vaguely in their direction. With nary any tact from the player, these NPCs will exposit massive amounts of information, in the process trying to make the player feel clever for discovering whatever stupid secret was being hidden. Hitman does this infinitely better, and my uninformed theory on why is simply that it's more restrained with its dialogue. An NPC in Hitman will say something like, well, you know she does keep that special package in a very intimate place upstairs. Whereas in Dishonored 2, it would be more like, I heard the lady keeps a massive dildo in the top drawer of her room on the 3rd floor. As you know, most dildos have a vibration setting, so you'll probably hear a faint buzzing noise if you were to get close enough to it. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but that's usually the level of subtlety that the dialogue has in Dishonored 2, and it's just difficult to stomach at times. This leads us into gameplay where, to keep the theme consistent, not much has changed. It's the same mix of first-person combat, stealth, and supernatural abilities, all within a light immersive sim framework. That is to say, you can approach levels and objectives in a variety of ways, and sometimes you even have to figure out additional options yourself. There is nothing wrong with the gameplay here. If the game existed in a vacuum and there was nothing else like it, I'd probably be very positive about it. But it's a sequel, and everything it does was done in the original with no real difference between them. The few additions it does make don't feel like additions. I played as Emily and was disappointed to see that her special abilities were essentially reskins of Corvo's abilities in Dishonored 1, and the abilities that were new I never found useful. Perhaps the levels were designed in a way that didn't offer satisfying use for them, or just didn't mix with the stealthy, non-violent approach I was going for. So this usually led to me just using my teleport ability all over the gap and scuttling away anytime I almost got spotted. There was one new unique thing, a level where you switch between 2 different time periods at will. Dishonored 2 is in the unlucky position of having been played by me several years after I already played Titanfall 2, which also had this exact same mechanic. So it didn't feel all that special, but it was still a nice change of pace to the rest of the campaign. Both games try to use in-world logic as to why you're able to use this time travel power in only one specific area, but here it really seemed to come out of nowhere and then leave out of nowhere. The only other new thing I can think of that the game has would be the clockwork soldiers, and this might be a particularly dumb nitpick, but I don't think they're fun enemies. They take forever to destroy if you choose the offensive route, and there isn't much you can do against them if you take the stealthy route except run and hide. Overall, I still think enemy design was a weakness from the first game that the sequel didn't improve on at all. At least the game still looks good. I'm a sucker for Arkane's visual direction and environment designs, and the new locale is aesthetically very interesting. It doesn't feel as stylized as the first game, but it still has enough visual flair that it doesn't have to worry about looking cutting edge, and I feel both of these games, and most of Arkane's other titles, age incredibly gracefully. And just like the first game, the sound design is nowhere near as noteworthy as the visuals. That's probably unfair. The sound design itself is perfectly fine, successfully combining the subtle ambience of a coastal city with the more supernatural elements. but there is still nothing that stands out, and there isn't a single memorable moment from the soundtrack. Dishonored 2 is a holding pattern game where if I had never played it, my life would be no different, except I would have had an extra 15 hours to do something else. I heard its standalone expansion, Death of the Outsider, was good, and I intend to play that at some point. But maybe I'll wait a little while until I once again get the urge to hide in the shadows and listen to some inane conversation whilst deciding if I'm going to just kill everyone. And then maybe I'll play some more Dishonored. Maybe.